They chased her away with whispers first, then with silence, and finally with their eyes. A young woman named Nandi, walking away from the village with a child on her back, carrying nothing but pride and memory. The boy's name was Shaka. He was not born in chains. He was born outside the circle, in the world of the Zulu, where cattle meant survival and lineage meant worth. Shaka entered life already marked. His father was a chief, but his mother was not a recognized wife. And so the people chose not to recognize the child. No ceremony, no welcome, no place by the fire. For a child, that kind of rejection does not disappear with time. It settles in the bones. Shaka grew up watching his mother endure insults meant to break her spirit. He learned early what it felt like to be looked through instead of looked at, to be spoken about but never spoken to feel hunger not just for food, but for dignity. Many of us listening know that feeling, being told, without words, that you are less than, that you don't belong, that the world has already decided your limits before you ever open your mouth. Shaka did not forget. He absorbed. As a boy, he followed his mother from place to place, learning to stand quietly in Chudland, learning that survival sometimes means becoming harder than the world that rejects you. Every laugh behind his back, every door closed, every night without safety, carved something sharp inside him. But Nandi did not raise him to bow his head. She raised him to remember who he was, even when the world refused to say his name. She taught him to stand straight, to endure without begging, to carry himself like someone who mattered, even when no one agreed. That lesson became the seed of everything that followed. Shaka did not dream of becoming a king as a child. He dreamed of never being powerless again, of never being pushed aside, of building a world where no one could tell him or his people to leave. This is where the story of Shaka Zulu truly begins. Not with armies, not with blood, but with a wound. A wound that asked a dangerous question. What happens when a child grows up believing the only way to be safe is to be feared? That question would one day shake the land. But at the beginning, it lived quietly in the heart of a boy, walking beside his mother, away from everything he was denied. This is not yet the story of a conqueror. This is the story of a child, learning that dignity is something you may have to take when it is never given. Shaka's childhood was not shaped by one village, but by the road. After being cast out, Nandi carried her son from place to place, moving through lands where they were tolerated but never embraced. Among neighboring clans, they survived as outsiders, fed sometimes by kindness, more often by silence. For Shaka, this life taught him a hard truth. Early home was not a place you were given. It was something you had to claim. Nandi became everything to him. She was mother, shield, and teacher. In a world that mocked her and her son, she refused to collapse. She did not beg for acceptance. She did not explain herself. She stood tall, even when people tried to shrink her. Shaka watched this closely. He learned that dignity could exist even in exile. But exile leaves marks. As Shaka grew older, other boys learned how to belong. He learned how to endure. He learned how to stay alert, how to read faces, how to sense danger before it arrived. Rejection sharpened him. Loneliness hardened him. Among the Mthethwa people, Shaka finally found a place where strength mattered more than birth. There, young men were expected to fight, to prove themselves, to earn respect with action. Shaka entered warrior life with a fire already burning inside him. He did not fight to impress. He fought to survive. Those who trained beside him noticed something unsettling. Shaka did not pull back. When others stopped, he continued. When a task was finished, he pushed further. Violence, for him, was not a game or a rite of passage. It was personal. Still, there was discipline, order, structure, and for the first time, Shaka saw how power could be organized, not just unleashed. He learned that strength multiplied when men moved as one, when commands were obeyed, when fear was replaced by rhythm and control. But even here, the wound traveled with him. Every victory whispered the same message: never be weak again. Never be dependent. Never let the world decide your worth. Nandi watched her son change. She saw the steel forming beneath his skin. Yet she never told him to soften. In a world that had shown them no mercy, she knew softness could be fatal. This was the second shaping of Shaka Zulu. Not just the pain of rejection, but the training of survival. Not just anger, but discipline. Not just hunger for dignity, but the growing belief that only strength could protect it. The boy who once walked away from a village now walked towards something else. Toward power. Toward command. Toward a destiny that would carry both his mother's pride and his own unhealed scars. Among the Mthethwa, Shaka learned something more dangerous than how to fight. He learned how power thinks. The Mthethwa were not the largest people in the region, but they were organized. They moved with purpose. They followed commands. And at the center of that order stood Dingiswayo, a leader who understood that authority was not just about strength, but about timing, restraint, and unity. Dingiswayo saw Shaka, not as a prince, not as an outcast, but as a weapon that could be sharpened or destroyed by discipline. Under his watch, Shaka was trained not only to strike, but to wait, not only to charge, but to hold formation. For the first time, Shaka experienced control placed over his violence, and he resisted it. There is a story passed down of a raid meant only to seize cattle. Shaka, leading men younger than himself, pursued the enemy too far. He did not stop when the task was done. He chased. He killed. He made sure no one stood back up. When he returned, Dingiswayo did not praise him. He rebuked him. He reminded Shaka that power without limits destroys the very order it claims to protect. That fear can scatter men just as easily as it can command them. It was a rare moment in Shaka's life when someone stronger told him no and lived. Shaka listened, but he did not forget. From Dingiswayo, he absorbed lessons deeply. How leaders are obeyed because systems support them. How warriors move as one body, not as scattered fists. How loyalty is built through structure, not chaos. Yet something else was forming inside him. Shaka admired Dingiswayo's restraint, but he did not believe the world would always allow it. He had seen too much cruelty, too much weakness punished, too many lives erased without mercy. In his mind, restraint was a luxury for those who had never been cast out. So he learned two paths at once. The public path was discipline, order, and obedience. The private path was resolve, suspicion, and readiness to destroy threats before they grew. This dual education shaped the man Shaka would become. He was no longer just reacting to pain. He was learning how to command it, how to channel it, how to make others move when he spoke. By the time he stood fully formed among the Mthethwa warriors, Shaka was no longer simply a survivor. He was a student of power, watching, learning, waiting. The exile had made him hard. The training had made him sharp. And somewhere deep within him, a certainty was growing. If he ever held power of his own, He would never allow himself to be questioned the way he once was, never corrected, never cast out again. When Shaka's father died, the past came back to collect its debt. Senzangakona was gone, and with him, the fragile protection that blood alone could offer. The Zulu people followed custom, not memory. They chose Sigujana, another son, properly born, properly placed. The rules of lineage spoke clearly. Shaka was still the child who did not belong. For Shaka, this was not simply a political decision. It was the final confirmation of a lifetime lesson. The world would never give him what he had not taken. With Dingiswayo's support, Shaka returned to the land that had once rejected him. Not quietly, not alone. He came surrounded by warriors, by discipline, by the authority of another power lending weight to his claim. The village that had once turned its back now stood silent. Sigujana did not rule long. History records his death briefly, but the meaning of it echoes loudly. Shaka ordered his removal. Blood sealed the transition. There was no speech, no ceremony, only certainty. In that moment, Shaka crossed a line that cannot be uncrossed. He learned that force works, that hesitation invites challenge, that mercy can be mistaken for weakness. The crown he took was heavy, but it fit the man he had become. Yet, power taken by violence demands constant guarding. Shaka knew this instinctively. He surrounded himself with loyalty, enforced by fear. He removed rivals before they could grow. He did not rule like a man at peace. He ruled like someone still fighting for survival. The boy who had once been corrected by Dingiswayo now corrected no one he commanded. And those who questioned him did not remain long. Still, beneath the authority, the wound remained. Every decision was shaped by the same fear that one day someone would decide he no longer belonged, that the circle would close again without him inside. So Shaka tightened his grip. The throne did not heal him, it confirmed him. From this point forward, Shaka Zulu was no longer simply protecting himself. He was protecting an idea that power, once claimed, must never be surrendered. And the land would soon learn what that belief meant. Power did not make Shaka cruel. It gave shape to what was already forming inside him. Before Shaka, the Zulu were not a single people. They were clusters of families, small clans bound by blood, cattle, and local loyalty. They fought when they had to, but mostly they endured. Strength was scattered. Identity was narrow. Survival depended on staying small enough not to be crushed. Shaka changed that. He understood something deeply instinctive. A people who do not see themselves as one will always be conquered by those who do. So he began, not just to rule, but to reshape how the Zulu understood themselves. He reorganized men by age and ability, not by family rank alone. Young warriors trained together, lived together, learned to move as one body. Loyalty shifted from clan elders to the state, from bloodlines to command, from tradition to purpose. This was not just military reform, it was psychological. Shaka stripped away the comfort of individuality and replaced it with belonging to something larger. In his world, you were no longer just a man protecting your cattle. You were part of a force, a rhythm, a nation in motion. Discipline became sacred. Orders were followed without question. Timing mattered. Formation mattered. Unity mattered. When warriors advanced, they did not rush. They closed in. When they struck, they did not scatter, they surrounded. The enemy did not face chaos. They faced certainty. For the Zulu, this transformation brought pride. Men who had once been vulnerable now stood shoulder to shoulder. Smaller clans found protection inside a larger identity. The Zulu name began to mean something beyond lineage. It meant strength. It meant order. It meant survival. But every revolution has a shadow. To maintain unity, Shaka demanded absolute obedience. Individual hesitation became betrayal. Dissent became danger. Fear was no longer just a weapon against enemies. It became a tool of internal control. And yet, for many, this was a price worth paying. In a world collapsing under pressure, overcrowding, competition for land, constant threat, Shaka's system offered clarity, safety through structure, dignity through discipline, power through unity. For the first time, the Zulu were not reacting to history. They were shaping it. Shaka had turned scattered people into a force that moved with purpose. He had given them a name that would echo long after his death. But the same structure that lifted a people also bound them tightly to one man's will. And as the Zulu rose higher, the cost of holding them together would grow heavier. Unity had been achieved. Now it had to be enforced. And enforcement, as Shaka knew better than anyone, always demands blood. As the Zulu rose, the land around them began to fracture. This was not a peaceful time in southern Africa. The soil was crowded. Herds grew larger. Rivers and grazing lands became lines of tension. Communities that had once lived side by side now lived on edge. In such a world, even a small imbalance could trigger a collapse. Shaka did not create this pressure, but he stood at its center. As the Zulu state expanded, neighboring peoples were forced to make impossible choices: submit, flee, or fight. Many chose flight. Others chose resistance. Few survived unchanged. The movement of armies and refugees rippled outward, pushing entire communities into unfamiliar lands. Later generations would call this period the Mthethwa, the crushing, the scattering. Villages emptied, paths filled with families carrying what they could. Old alliances broke apart. New conflicts ignited as displaced people collided with others already struggling to survive. Violence multiplied, not always by command, but by fear. For Shaka, this chaos confirmed his deepest belief: that weakness invited destruction, that hesitation meant death, that only overwhelming force could bring order. Against rivals like the Ndwandwe, Shaka fought not just to win, but to end the threat completely. He struck fast, cut off supplies, forced enemies into exhaustion before battle was even joined. His armies moved with precision, while others relied on numbers alone. Victory followed victory. But each triumph widened the storm. Defeated warriors did not disappear. They scattered. Some formed new kingdoms, far from Zulu lands. Others carried Shaka's methods with them, spreading the logic of militarized survival across the region. What began as defense became transformation on a continental scale. This is the tragedy of the Mthethwa. No single hand controlled it. Yet, Shaka's shadow lay across much of it. He was both a shield for his people and a catalyst for wider suffering. Protector and disruptor at the same time. For the Zulu, the price was clarity. They survived when others did not. They stood unified while the world around them broke apart. In that sense, Shaka succeeded, but survival came soaked in displacement and grief. The land remembered every march, every burned homestead, every family that never returned. Shaka believed history rewarded strength, and in his time, it did. But history also keeps accounts, and the bill for survival in an age of fear is never paid all at once. It echoes for generations. The Mthethwa was not just a series of wars. It was the sound of a region being remade by pressure, by fear, and by men who believed that standing still meant extinction. Shaka stood, and the ground shifted beneath everyone else. By the mid-1820s, Shaka ruled a kingdom, but lived without a home. Power surrounded him, yet intimacy did not. In a society where kings were expected to have many wives and many sons, Shaka kept his private world closed. He did not publicly acknowledge an heir. He did not build a family that could outlive him. Whether by choice or fear, the result was the same. The throne stood alone. There was only one constant in Shaka's inner life: his mother, Nandi. She had walked beside him when no one else would. She had absorbed insults meant for him. She had stood upright when Exile tried to bend her. In many ways, she was the last living witness to the boy Shaka once was. When Nandi died in 1827, something inside Shaka broke. The sources describe a ruler unmoored. Grief spilled into command. Mourning became law. People were ordered to grieve as deeply as he did, or suffer the consequences. Work slowed. Fields went untended. The rhythms of life paused, and hunger followed. Some of these accounts may have been exaggerated by later enemies, but exaggeration only survives when it fits a truth. And the truth was, this Shaka no longer trusted the world to hold him up. Without Nandi, the wound had no witness, no restraint. The king who had once demanded discipline now demanded emotional obedience. Loyalty was no longer enough. Sorrow had to be performed, and those closest to him began to fear that his pain had no bottom. Inside the royal household, silence thickened. Brothers watched carefully. Advisors spoke less. Survival now meant invisibility. Shaka had unified a nation, but he had not healed himself. The strength that had built the kingdom had never learned how to rest, never learned how to grieve without commanding others to bleed with him. Power had given him control, but grief stripped away balance. And in that imbalance, the final danger grew not from foreign enemies, but from within his own blood. Because when a ruler stands alone, surrounded by fear, the question is no longer whether power will be challenged. It is who will strike first. On a quiet day in September 1828, the kingdom Shaka built turned its blade inward. There was no great battle, no warning drums, no army at the gates. The danger walked toward him with familiar faces. Brothers, blood, men who had grown up in his shadow, shaped by his fear, hardened by his rule. When they struck, they did not strike a god. They struck a man who had stood too long without rest. Shaka Zulu died where he stood, betrayed by those closest to him. He was about 41 years old. The same hands that had helped build the kingdom now hurried to erase him, to bury his body quietly, to control the story that would follow. Power passed quickly, but stability did not. The men who followed Shaka inherited his system, not his presence. They ruled with suspicion, not vision. And yet, the structure he created endured. The discipline, the identity, the memory of what it meant to stand united. Decades later, when foreign armies marched into Zulu lands with rifles and cannons, they did not face scattered clans. They faced a people who remembered how to stand together. At Isandlwana, long after Shaka's bones had turned to dust, the Zulu inflicted one of the most shocking defeats in British imperial history. That victory did not come from nowhere. It came from the foundation. Shaka laid the idea that African people could organize themselves, command themselves, and defend themselves without permission. That idea mattered. It still matters. History often struggles with men like Shaka. Some call him a monster. Some call him a hero. But history, written only in judgment, misses the deeper truth. Shaka was a man shaped by rejection, sharpened by exile, elevated by discipline, and finally consumed by unhealed pain. He built a nation before he learned how to live inside his own wounds. For those of us listening today, especially those who have carried the weight of being underestimated, Shaka's life is not just African history. It is a warning and a mirror. Strength can protect you. Discipline can lift you. Unity can save you. But power without healing will always turn inward. Shaka Zulu does not belong only to textbooks or historical facts. He belongs to memory, to elders' voices, to the long tradition of history. Legends passed down so we do not forget who we have been or what it cost to survive. This is not a story to glorify violence. It is a story to reclaim dignity. Because before the world tried to tell us who we were, we already had stories. Before the world tried to erase us, we already had kingdoms. And before sleep takes us, history for sleep reminds us of one truth that cannot be conquered. We come from builders. Even when those builders were broken,